Anybody has a community that has nothing to do with the budget that they want to start off with first? Otherwise, we'll take questions right as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
All right, so I thought we would go through the budget slides, Lisa, and then if people have questions about the summary or any of the detail, we'll take those too. Could you pop the presentation up on the screen? So I like to stand up. Oh, and we have Heather, so we're all set.
Okay, cool.
Yes, please. So we have about 18 slides that we're going to go through, but I did want to, so my name is John Albertini, and I'm the superintendent of Mount Mansfield School District. Been superintendent for 15 years. Been in the district for 22 as a principal and also as the assistant superintendent. Very thankful and grateful to have had the good fortune to be here for so long. I did want to let you know that we have our annual report and a flyer and a way to get more information on the website on the table out back. Before I jump in, can you put a presentation on, please? This has been a really challenging budget year. In the 15 years that as superintendent and really 25 years working on school budgets, this has been the most challenging. It's been confusing. There's been a lot of new information. We came into this year thinking that we were going to be working under certain criteria for education funding. And after we had warned our budget, prepared our budget, and got information out to people, the state changed the law and made some changes that really necessitated us to relook at our budget, revise it, reduce it, and present it to the electorate. So I don't know of a time where we've ever postponed a vote for the budget, school budget, ever. So this is very unprecedented and very unique. So we're going to go through the slides, and if you have specific questions, then please just raise your hand and I'll try to answer them. It might be better if you could wait till the end, but if you can't and you have something burning, and that goes for people that are online, please just let us know and we'll try to answer it, okay? And I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. This is a really good turnout, and it just shows that you're interested in what's going on in the budget, and hopefully we'll do a good job of explaining it tonight. If there's something that we can't answer, then we're going to take your name and we'll get you the information as soon as we can, okay? So this is our first slide. So these are, you're going to see a little bit of a theme, but a real priority for the school district is not just the academics, but the social, emotional needs and welfare of students. And a big push for us is really trying to promote kindness and being good citizens, learning about civics and how important it is to include everybody, to be caring and kind and empathetic. This is a kindness pledge, this picture here. And if you go to the next one, please. So this is also, I call it the MMU way. Right here, our office, I sit in the middle of two preschools. So my office is here. I have a preschool on one side and the preschool on the other, and these kids are amazing. And the preschools are excellent. And one of the best things that we ever did was move our central office into a school. Because we're interacting with students every day, we really have a more intimate and firsthand look at what's going on all the time, particularly with some of our youngest learners. And so these are super these are our kindness superheroes. And February was Kindness Month for our preschools. And so we read books about kindness. We talked about what kindness looks like when you're 3 and 4 years old, and 5 and 6 and 7. And the students really resonated for them. I think this sort of is a model that we want to be giving our students, and it's something we try to do every day. This is also with one of our classroom where the first thing when you walk in is you see that this classroom runs on kindness. If you look at my laptop, on the back of it, we have these stickers. I thought about bringing some, but I forgot. Kindness matters. And so it's something we just want to promote because it has an effect, all the way up to grade 12. If you could bring the next one. So I'm trying to set up a few things. One, sort of the underpinnings of the budget. What's in the budget, why we do it, who it supports, and some of the value added that we get from it. So these are some budget goals, and I call them our guiding star, but they're also our ends. So these are big goals that the district and the board spent almost 2 years interacting with all of the constituents in all 5 of our towns and look for themes about what do people want for their schools. And we came up with some overarching goals that really guide budget development. So first, it's, we want to have students that are lifelong learners, effective, engaged citizens that value their community, and that we're giving them the educational opportunities that they need at a reasonable cost, so that they can be successful when they exit Mount Mansfield in 12th grade. We try to do that in a variety of different ways, and having the best educational tools that we can and that we can afford, and that are 21st century, up to date, meeting the needs of students where they're at. Go to the next slide, please. And these are some other big priorities that have been driving our budget, the investments that we're making. What we think is really going to leverage success for students. And they're the key priority, particularly post-COVID, where we're seeing a lot more stress, a lot more mental health issues for all of our students, really 3 to 18 years old. So we're really prioritizing social emotional health of students and staff. COVID was very stressful, and post-COVID has had its own challenges. And then our anti-bias, anti-racism, and equity and inclusion efforts, we've invested in that, both on the program side and staffing resources to support the work that we're doing, making sure our curriculum is inclusive and is promoting the values that we think are important, which is really caring and making everyone feel respected and valued and cared for when they walk into the building. Another key priority that we put a lot of work and a lot of resources is early literacy. And it's really the cornerstone, it's the foundation of everything that we do. And so we have put a lot of professional development. We bought a lot of new resources and assessments to make sure that kids get the best possible start that they can with literacy. We really moved towards a very, scientific method of teaching reading, and one that is, comprehensive and balanced. And then there's some jargon here, so forgive me. I'm going to try to break it down but these are things that we really are focused on. First is multi-tiered systems of support, which are just layers to make sure that we don't have any students falling through the cracks. So if we know that a student has a need or is not meeting grade level expectations, then we have a process to make sure that we're getting them what they need. And that goes along with universal design, which is just providing instruction and instructional strategies to meet the needs of a diverse set of students, meeting them where they're at and making sure it's flexible and differentiated. And then professional learning communities are really, that's the glue. So that's literally teachers, staff members sitting down weekly, taking a look at student work and developing strategies for students that need a little more and students that, again, are not meeting grade level expectations. And trying to really focus on data. And then alignment of the curriculum. We have, we're 200 square miles. And so we have a very big district. And all of our students go to a high school together, a union high school. And so we want to make sure that regardless of where you go to school, you're getting an equitable educational experience. That doesn't mean it's the same, but the standards, the expectations, the resources are equitable. So that when kids get to high school, they're ready to be successful. And then, I love this picture. This was the class of 2023. We had about 215 students and just a bunch of really, really nice students. But just great students that are doing all sorts of great things. So about 70%, close to that, are going off to doing something post-secondary. So that's college. Could be a 2-year college, could be a 4-year college, or it could be getting a certificate or going into an apprenticeship. And then about 30% are going to work, going to the military, or they're taking a year to figure out what they want to do. We have a lot of students that me personally, because I was pretty immature when I graduated from high school, I did take a year off, and it was good for me, and I think it's good for a lot of our students as well. So we should be really proud of these kids. I know I am, and I know a lot of the faces in there, and just a great group of students. So I spoke a little bit in the beginning about some of the challenges, and Act 127, which is all the funding changes that happen, has been a big challenge. I think the intent was very good. The analysis, the planning, the implementation was not. So they used a lot of older data that isn't relevant now, and there were some big mistakes. I'm not blaming anybody because mistakes happen. I know I've made many, but this is not something we created. The funding formula changes came from the legislature. Intent good, but I think the application was not. So I wanted to share with you, at age 50 was the changes that happened very, very late. Like after we had warned our budget, we had planned it, we had deliberated for months on it, the rules changed, the board and the district had the good sense to say, okay, we need to go back and relook at our budget and make some revisions and make some reductions, because the effect would have been very, very bad. This just shows, this is a sample. I took this from BT Digger. I thought it was a really good representation because it shows some of the effects that the actual law is Act 84. But as you can see, the green here is that you gained tax capacity, or it was a benefit. This color, which I don't know, I would call it a tan, I guess, is you lost tax capacity. So you were negatively that 127 and the changes to 127 had you lost tax capacity and you lost some weighted students, which are pretty important. And so it had a negative impact on you. So what the state did was they took the previous funding formula last year, the one we were using last year, and they looked at what was your percentage of the overall pupil count for the state. So for example, in Burlington, it was 4.37. And then they applied the new weighting under Act 127, and they looked at, okay, what is your share now? Did you gain more students, or did you lose students? And you can see, I'll go to Mount Mansfield. We lost students. So and they looked at, well, what was the percentage loss? And for Mount Mansfield, it was 12.8. So they rounded it to 13, and then they applied a 1 cent discount to every percentage that a district lost compared to last year to the new weights. Does that make sense? Yes.
I think it's important to also say it doesn't represent actual human beings. Our student count is roughly is projected to be the same as it is this year. So it's just has to.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't have really our pupil count is flat. So we have been declining for a while, and we have been we've been somewhat flat for the last few years, which is good. We'd like to be climbing a little, but flat is better than declining. So this just represents, again, Rutland City. Their proportion went up comparatively, and so and I want to make sure people understand Act 127. The weights are higher for specific categories of students. The students that are economically disadvantaged and English language learners. And because there has been some research that it costs more to educate those students, and that as you matriculate up, it costs more as well. So a high school student is weighted more than an elementary student. So I wanted to show just some of our enrollment trends, because that's important. We're relatively flat. I have another slide that I'll show you that we're flat pre-K to 12 too. So the net I can't remember, is probably 6 kids when you look at preschool. So we're talking we're static. We're flat our enrollment. So we have not cut but staff. We need every staff person literally that we have right now to meet the needs of students on a day-to-day basis. And the needs have increased post-COVID. We have more students that are having a hard time regulating their behavior, and have a hard time lost some ground in literacy and math due to COVID. If you go to the next slide. And then this is just our preschool slide. So you can see it's up a little bit, but it's flat. And that's, again, good news, because we have been, declining a bit. And it goes up and down. It depends. But at least we're not going, like we were having big drops a few years ago, probably 10. And then I just want to put a bumper sticker here, because this doesn't include, we have 180 preschool partnerships also. So, about Act 166, which is the preschool law, that families can go to a qualified private provider that we have an agreement with, and they get a voucher. So that's also, and that needs to be in budget. So that's statutory. So here's a summary of some of the changes. So from our previously warned budget here, and then the revised budget, the change, and the percentage change. We also did education spending, because that is a key factor in figuring out your tax rate. And education spending is revenue that you get, mostly IDEA or special ed revenue. That's the bulk of it. Some categorical grants that are not funded through property taxes. And then what our tax rate was without the cap for Act 127, and what it is now in the proposed budget. And then we applied the discount, which is that 13 cents that I talked about earlier. And you can see that the tax rate actually went down a little bit compared to what we had presented in the first previously warned budget. And then the change, we were at the 5% cap, and we're at 4.49% now. Okay. This is Nicole. So I'm going to introduce Nicole Fortier, who is she's our Director of Finance and Operations, and she's going to go through a few more slides with you.
Hello. So laid out here are the main budget drivers of the increase year over year. We'll just start off at the top. We added a little bit more facilities money this year, as there's some required, there's some state required facility stuff that we need to do this year. Stormwater mitigation, radon testing that we have not dealt with in previous years. Salaries and wages is really driven by the negotiated agreements that started in FY23 and go through fiscal year 25. We'll get to it in another 2 slides, but on top of the negotiated agreements, there were 2 positions added that were previously ESSER funded. So that was COVID relief money that we absorbed into the local budget going forward. Health insurance is a 16.4% increase this year. And when we saw 12.5% last year, we thought that was crazy. So we were really taken aback by the 16.4% this year. I mean, that line alone is almost a quarter of the year over year total increase. As we continue to pay down our debt service, that has gone down a little bit this year. So we'll take that nice relief. And then the remaining is just due to, increased costs in technology and technology related contracts and increased costs of school buses and insurance, etc. This is just a visual of what we just pointed out there. So the 8% increase year over year, and this is total budget, not education spending. And then this is the ed spending comparison. And as John just noted, this is really the money that we get that is not covered by other grant sources. So this is a nice visual of our 4-year tax rate comparison. So I think it is important to note that our tax rate the last 2 years in fiscal 23 and fiscal 24 decreased due to surplus in the ed fund. So the yield was higher than we had seen the last few years. So that really caused the tax rate in 23 and 24 to go down. But it is important to note that the tax rate in 25, the proposed tax rate, is lower than the rate that we saw in 23, even with that ed surplus money. And this is the tax rate reflective of that 13-cent discount that John spoke to. This was what I mentioned when I went through the budget drivers. So as John already spoke to, the need for these behavioral support and interventionist positions, and these were 2 previously COVID relief, it's ESSER funds, ESSER funded positions that we decided were still necessary and absorbed in the local budget this year. I spoke before also on the budget drivers slide about the facilities money this year. We increased it a small amount. And again, a good chunk of that is due to the stormwater mitigation that we haven't dealt with previously. Some dehumidification work in the high school that's really important and necessary. So this is just a breakdown of how we plan to spend those facilities monies. Okay, so now let's get into the tax rate. So let's start with, I know John has kind of already gone through a good chunk of this. The 13% discount, this gets us down to the tax rate that's presented, the pre-CLA tax rate, and we'll get into the CLA component a little bit more in the next slide. One big difference that you'll notice is the long-term, what we're referring to now is the long-term weighted average daily membership. That language used to be equalized pupils. So this is really the big impact of Act 127. So where it looks like our pupils have gone up, they have in number, but we have lost our share compared to other districts in the state of Vermont. And although our weighted pupils number is going up, you will see the opposite. The impact really is on the estimated property yield. So what this state has said that they can afford to pay per student in the state, that number is way, way, way down this year. And, some of these numbers are still subject to, they'll be finalized in the 24 legislative session. So there could be some small variability, but this is the most up-to-date information that we have right now. Okay. CLA. So I want to start off by looking at the far left column. So we have 5 towns in our district, as you know. The date in blue that you're seeing there is the last year of reappraisal. So you'll notice some variability between, for example, Huntington and Jericho, 2 of our towns who are in need of reappraisal and have not been reappraised in a number of years, whereas Bolton and Richmond were more recently reappraised in 23. So that is why you're seeing the larger decrease there. So in case it's not commonly known, a common level of appraisal at 100% would indicate a home that is assessed at fair market value. So the common level of appraisal percentage is needed to adjust tax rate to to get that equality across the state in what folks are paying. So I think it is important to note too, though, while you're seeing what appears to be a big decrease, you have to also take into consideration that those homes were reappraised at a higher value. So the tax rate that is then applied to that home is on a bigger base, if that makes sense. So they're not necessarily going to see that large decrease, if that makes sense. Is there a question?
I don't see one.
Okay. And then we did want to provide some information on the income sensitive tax rate. So about 70% of households receive a property tax credit. And the calculation of that is relatively confusing. So we wanted to put some of the parameters in here. I think important things to know for anyone listening is the income threshold this year is $128,000, I believe. So if you live in a household where your household income is less than $128,000, you are eligible for the credit. There is a calculator here that we've attached. So if you go onto the website and find the agenda, and you can get to these slides, and it'll take you right to the calculator. JFO has not yet posted the calculator for 25. We've linked the one for 24. That's the most up-to-date information out there. But I think it'll give you a good sense of where you land. Questions? Or John?
We also linked the detail and the summary of the budget in the agenda. It's also in the annual report. That's online, and I brought some hard copies too.
Yes.
I hate to even ask this, because it's so confusing, but the property yield, or the yield, whatever, is what the state's gonna put in per pupil, and it affects the tax rate for all of us, right?
Yeah, so
The
good.
property yield,
Yep.
yeah. And so the property yield, is that's pretty dependent on the total amount of education funding in the state, right?
Yes.
Right. We don't have any control. We have control over a little tiny piece.
Correct.
And at this point in the cycle, there are a whole lot of school budgets that are still very much undecided. So how is the legislature even going to go about figuring out property yield with so many districts having voted down their budgets because they didn't delay like we did, which was kind of a smart thing to do, and revise the budget before we voted on it. But all these other districts, who knows what they're gonna do? I mean, they might shave a little bit off their budget and it still might be voted down. This would go on for a long time, it seems, so how do you get to finality on that yield, which affects property taxes?
Yeah, I think this year it feels the volatility of that, or, you know, the fact that those change, that's been the case every year. We're just much more in tune to that this year. I can tell you that the state is constantly asking for that information, updated information. So for districts like us who had previously shared our warned budget, and then we went back and now we've warned a new budget, they're asking for that information. So they're constantly pulling from the districts what their new ed spending is. And I think they're constantly reworking that number, and they share it with us. I actually think, you know, maybe by the end of this week, we'll see possibly a new yield, but I can share with you also that we've seen a few yields over the last 2 months, and they've changed within about $10 of one another. So this is the most up-to-date information that we have, but yeah.
They try to, it's a very good question. You know, in a typical year, most budgets are all passed by April 15th. So then they know what the total cost of education is going to be, and then they are able to figure out pretty much what the yield is and what the tax rates are going to be, and then they send those to towns. They, unless something changes, and Edie, you correct me if I'm wrong, you know, where they're going to have to set a yield before the ed funding formula period before the end of the session. There may still be some districts that don't have their budgets approved, and they'll have to try to factor that in. And I don't think some of that would have to be made up potentially in the next year too, if they don't know by July 1, for example. So good question, very good question.
Are they looking currently at other sources of revenue for the ed fund to help with this?
Edie's a representative.
Yeah.
I tried to sneak in the back. So it's a two-factor issue, right? So yes, the answer is yes. The legislature is looking at how to fund education better, and also looking at how to contain costs in education in the state, because right now, as you know, right, we vote on our budget locally. Everybody votes on their budget locally. All of that money gets pooled into a big pot and then divided back out and add in other taxes and things like that. And then we all pay for it. But there aren't containments on how you spend the money except for local voters. And so it won't happen this year, but it will happen soon, right? That there will be, I'm prognosticating, some kinds of containment for how money is spent. But that isn't today, and that isn't this budget. But it is something that is important to look at. And what it means is things like what we did in our district, which is consolidate so that there is one set of administrators for a larger group of students, right? There are more kids in classes so that kids can have a more robust education with more opportunity when you have, you know, hundreds or thousands of kids in your district versus 40 kids in your district or 100 kids in your district, right? So there are things that are better for taxpayers and for students that can be done to contain costs. But that's not why we're here today. So.
We didn't have this slide, but our flyer, if you could take a look at it, there's a couple of charts in there that I think are important. One, we have the second lowest tax rate in the county. Colchester has a lower one, we have the second lowest. And our ed spending per pupil is below the county average, and we're third. So Colchester and Winooski, who did benefit from Act 127, has a lower ed spending per pupil. So that's a pretty good indicator, a very good indicator, I'd say, about how we are trying to be really thoughtful about how we spend taxpayers' money. And we have been successful over the last, even though I know it doesn't feel like it because I pay property taxes too, we've done a really good job of being able to mitigate the impact on the tax rate.
I just have one question. My name is Bob. I was living in Jericho. My wife and I are both retired. So it's me. You guys did a great job here, but is there any simple way of figuring out this is how much the budget's going to reduce? This is how much we're going to pay. In Jericho, I know the reappraisal is coming up, so I don't know if that's going to throw things totally out of whack. Any numbers now where you may see a reduction in quotes. It just may mushroom up in a couple of years with a reappraisal, so I have no idea how that's all going to pan out. But I guess I'm just looking for a simple answer, which is not fair to ask. But you know, is there any way that a simple formula? This is how much you reduced it. This is how much I will see an increase, and we're projecting a little bit more in the future. I know you gave some of that already, but. A lot of numbers, I just don't know really. I mean, people are bouncing 18%, 15%. I still don't know where I would stand in that mix. And a couple other questions. You know, I support schools, I really do, but as a senior, you know, I'm on a fixed income, and so is my wife or whatever. So as costs keep going up, the more that's taken out, it takes a hit on what I have to spend, to spend on whatever. So is there any discussion of more income versus property tax, or students in the system that, I'm sorry to say this, but if you have students in the system, should some formula work out where those that have students currently in the system, perhaps, or maybe they do already, pay more, and then those of us that have paid for generations for our kids going through the system for many years after. I know there's a tax break, if you will, but you know, I just don't see any equity in the system whatsoever. How is this set up? And I don't envy you all as a board because it's coming from Montpelier, and you have to deal with many dictates coming down. And my concern also is who's in bed with the NEA? Do people really push back and say, look, we can't handle all these dictates from the state all the time? I mean, it's easy to always say it's for the children, it's for the good. We all want the best for the children. There's no doubt about that. But is there any really hard pushback? I mean, you get things from the state. Does the school board go back and say, enough? I mean, we can't do this. You know, sustain this, keep going forward. You know, the student population keeps dropping, and the cost keeps going up, and I don't see really any control in that. So I know I kind of threw out quite a bit there, but it's just there's a lot of us out there. Just we don't know A to B to C. You know what we're really. I still don't know what I'm facing coming up in taxes for the, for the school thing. And the last point I would make is my understanding is if the budget is defeated, then you have to go back to 87%, I believe, of what is offered in the budget. You have to work off that.
You can borrow up to 87% of this year's budget. If you don't have a budget passed by July 1. But, and this is an important but, you have to keep voting on that budget. You have to keep voting on it until it passes. You can't just, at some point, we have to have a passed budget, and, the impacts would be, 87% would be, honestly catastrophic. We did cut, I'll try to answer part of your question. We cut $5.5 million out of what we had presented previously, which was a 8.87% decrease, I think.
Yep.
So we did take quite a bit of money out. We had earmarked for really necessary facilities. Our buildings are old. We've done a really good job. I think if you walk through this building, you'd say, wow, you've done a good job of maintaining them. But the systems are, 50, 55, 60 years old. So we have to start updating them, soon. And there's in 2007, they stopped construction aid for schools. For decades before that, there was construction aid. And so it's been really, really hard, one, to pass bonds, because all of that goes on to the property tax. And you put those in your budget because, again, it just inflates it. So it's been very, very challenging to put a dent in it. A part of hopefully I answered some of it. The CLA calculation, you really need to take a look at the value of your home, take a look at what the rate is per town. You can kind of estimate it like per 100,000. But then you also want to, if you do get a tax rate, you want to calculate that in, because it can be, for some folks, notable.
And then to answer a couple of your other questions, yes, folks are looking at other ways to raise money, and should it be done with property taxes? It's not going to change this year, but yes. And I ran for office because of all the things that you said. I want to be there sitting at the table as these decisions are made, and I want to push back before the decision is made, because I've been sitting at this table for long enough to know that my voice is too late here, and so I need to be there. And so, yeah, we're trying, and there's now a cohort of, about 15 of us in the State House that are working on this at the beginning. So it's 15 of 150. It's a reasonable number. We're working on it.
As far as we're based on income versus property value?
There was a study that came out in 2022 that they started looking at that. So that's pretty recent. That's something that's on the table. Yep. Yeah.
And all I pretty much hear is what other sources can we go to make up the shortage or whatever? And that's a legit question. I understand that. But I don't hear the cuts. I don't hear, I've heard also discussion of that. Most districts are top heavy, if you will. Again, we have multiple, I'm not going out the principles or whatever, but you have multiple positions covering that maybe could be better consolidated, maybe not. I don't know. But I guess my real concern is how much pushback. I mean, there's a majority in Montpelier. And my personal experience is, my feeling is that I don't know how well we're really listened to out there. That with such a large majority, things in Montpelier are going to go a certain way, and there's only seems to be a look at, how can we make up for this? Can we have a soda tax to make up this? Well, it all comes back as lower taxes for everybody. So it's, I just hope there's a really hard pushback. It's like, why take this from Montpelier when the school boards or others have to say no, enough, or these are legitimate concerns, but these other items, you need to push back. I mean, I think Montpelier needs to hear that, in my view. It's.
Oh, and our board is part of the Vermont School Boards Association, and we are a voice there. And so we do have a lobbyist to lobby for us, a group that and so we are looking at that. Like your frustrations are valid, and we're trying to make it better. So yeah, and we can talk offline because that's not, I mean, this budget we can only work within the system that we have today. And so we've really done our best to do that, to make sure that our students are taken care of, and we have appropriate staffing, and our buildings are safe for students, and our taxpayers can pay for it. And we know that this is a hard year statewide, we know that. So we've really been very cautious with what we've put together in the budget. So, and Bob, I'm really happy to chat with you about legislative things offline.
Okay.
The way I understand it, and I'm a novice at this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is that Montpelier has had some policies to protect children who are non-native English speakers, or to bolster their education and to bolster the education of those children living in Vermont who are of low socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
It has been shown, I'm a social scientist, so it's been shown over and over again that those are pretty much across the nation, that kids who come from low socioeconomic status are not getting the same education that kids from higher socioeconomic status. So, am I correct that those are the things that there's something?
Yeah, those are the big drivers that,
And so they're mixing, and that may not be happening in our district as much as it might be happening in other districts. And some of our money is getting mixed in to a state level distribution that will address the needs of these children.
Yeah. The previous people waiting, from what I understand, it's not really based on any sort of data. It was mostly like that. I might be just slightly.
yeah, it was very old.
Yeah.
It was done by the Agency of Education. I don't think there was any like empirical data necessarily behind it.
Right. And this new way of weighting the pupils does have that kind of research behind it.
Right, like using the free lunch.
Right.
Yeah, that's a pretty good indicator.
Right.
And, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank
Oh,
you.
one more question. Sorry.
It's okay.
What's the 5% thing? It's like a capping?
That was the way the law was originally written, was to, if you were one of the disadvantaged districts, like we are in terms of the weighting going down or the proportion going down, then the tax rate would be capped at 5% to help cushion the blow and eventually transition to the full tax change, yeah.
They
But
got rid of the
they got rid of
5% cap, and that was what John was speaking to. We lost a share of approximately 13%,
Right.
and that translates to, in year one, a 13-cent discount on our homestead tax rate. That is a 5-year, that will phase out over 5 years, and each year that percent decreases by 20%. So we'll get 13 cents this year, I believe it's 10 cents, 8 cents, and so on until.
Yeah, so we're in for a little bit of a long haul if nothing changes, because what happens is that inflates your tax rate because you're losing the discount. So that's something we're going to want to try to clearly communicate to folks so that they understand.
Thank you.
So one of the charts that I saw here, I think, shows that the tax rate is actually lower this year than it was 2 years ago. Is that
Yeah,
last year that could actually went down?
Yep. And if you go back the year before, which is in the flyer, It's lower than it was in FY 21 by quite a bit, like 20 cents. So again, I think tried to do a really good job of thoughtful with how the money is spent so that we have the least amount of impact on the taxpayer that we can.
Michael Weber?
Yes. The decrease back in 21 to 22, that was, I think, due to reappraisal in Underhill, Richmond, and Bolton that happened in 22 and 23. So when those tax rates are reappraised upwards, I have a feeling the rate dropped. And that's kind of like a artifact and not really,
No, that's
a
not
decrease in spending.
We're looking specifically at the homestead tax rate. So
It's not the CLA, it's the,
Yeah, it's what we control.
Yeah.
It's the tax rate that is generated from the district with no application of the common level of appraisal, which is something that we don't control. That's based on a 3-year rolling average of what your home sales are.
is that clear, Michael?
Yeah, that's clear, but I don't see that looking back at budget amounts, there's no great decrease. Why would the tax rate drop? I mean, unless the tax base increased drastically, I don't see how that happens.
So that comes from,
That's part of the funding formula. It depends
Yeah.
on what the base yield amount is and what our overall pupil count is and what we spend.
right, and then also they paid down, the education fund paid down some of that, correct? During
Yes.
those years.
Yep,
So when there
it
were
was a surplus.
surpluses in the budget because of COVID, that's what helped to drive down the tax rate.
So
All
two
right, thanks.
things, two things happened that year. Vermont had more revenue, more sales and use tax income, which is about 60-70% of the money that goes into our education fund. Because people were only traveling locally and not internationally, so a lot of people came to Vermont because it was a safe place to be. So our tax base went up, and we had more federal money going into schools, so the costs went down, and so that together made the tax rate go down.
Any other questions, comments?
The only thing I'd share is we have a lot of information on the website. And please take a look. If anybody has a question, you would send it to one of us. It's here and we will try to get the answer.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. And thanks everybody for coming very much.
There is another informational meeting on March 28th at MMU, at the same time then, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. There'll be a virtual option as well.
And I'd like to encourage you all to vote for the budget on April 2nd.
Your polling place may have changed.
Yes.
Yes, look at the flyer. But please vote. Please vote.